Hey everyone, this is my Altis Sigma MX that I've been in possession of for exactly 1 week now. And let's see, I've got roughly, I'm reading 90 miles on the odometer, which isn't entirely accurate because I didn't have the gear ratio set up correctly on the first ride or two. So it's probably more like 70, 75 miles total. But let's look at some of the little issues I've had with the bike. Nothing too major, hasn't left me stranded or anything like that. But there have been small little issues. It is a first run production bike, so there's always going to be little things that go wrong, unforeseen things. But there's been a few little things, so I'll go over them with you real quick. Now, full disclosure, I do ride my bikes pretty damn hard. Not that there's anything wrong with riding on the street, but that's just not what I do. Probably 99% off-road. I live in Tennessee and I'm local to the Red Bull Tennessee Knockout races, and that's the kind of stuff I like to do. Now, I do intend eventually building this bike up to run in the knockout race. I don't think it would do very well as it is now, especially with the 16-19 wheel size combination. But that just gives you a kind of glimpse of the type of riding I do, and I plan on doing with this bike. I haven't done it yet. All I've been doing is woods riding. Nothing that hard on it. But that being said, I do beat on it pretty good. So not everybody is probably going to see the same issues I'm seeing. This is kind of a torture test, if you want to put it that way. It's just kind of accelerates the wear that you would normally see on a bike. First little issue, which I know some other people have already seen, are the shock mount bushings. You can hear that. Upper bushing's already blown out. Lower seems fine, but the upper has about 10th thou of play in it already, and it didn't have that the first time I rode it. So that's some of that accelerated wear. This is the rear caliper hanger, and this is a little shark fin that's designed to protect your rear rotor from hits, rocks, anything like that. And you can see I've already got into it a little bit, and it has bent inward slightly, enough to be contacting the rotor, and it has put a nice little lip in it. So if you hear your rotors making a weird noise when you're not on the brakes, check for stuff like that. Fairly thin, so I'm going to try to bend it out. I may end up remaking these and making them a lot thicker because I haven't even really played in the rocks yet and I've already bent it. So a little bit thicker or a lot thicker would definitely help in that case. Now this is your access. Normally there's a key, there's a little lock cylinder, and you put the key in there and it pops the seat open. Well, obviously it gets muddy. The first time I rode it, I guess a rock hit it, some mud hit it, and it was wide open and jam-packed full of mud. So this is probably fine for a bike that is ridden on the street, but if you plan on riding in the woods, in the mud, anything like that, this design just isn't great for that kind of scenario. So I'll show you what I've gone ahead and done. Under the seat here is a fairly standard latch mechanism with a cable that used to run down into this lock cylinder. So I've just taken the cable and designed this little guy, which is a 3D printed piece, using one of the factory shoulder bolts that bolts on all the plastic that I have removed. But this little guy is pretty simple. You just push on them like that, and it pops the seat open. So you don't need to carry this key around. And these are the keys it comes with. Now this probably wouldn't be a very good idea if you ride in the city a lot and leave your bike locked up somewhere. Anybody can gain access to it if they want. But like I said, for me, I ride in the woods, either alone or with a few friends, so it's not a big issue to me. Another thing to note, some people have had issues with the seat popping open when they do jumps or hit stairs or anything like that. There's your little safety catch. It's kind of rounded, so I can see why you would get a false sense of thinking the seat is latched and it's not latched. But if you look at the actual mechanism and the way it works, to me, if you get a positive latch, it shouldn't come back open. So I don't know if this design has changed from different model bikes. This is the MX version. The non-MX version, which the only issue, or not issue, the only difference between the bikes is supposed to be the rear wheel size and the sprocket size, but there could be little changes in between the production runs. Those bikes were built first and delivered first. This bike came about a month later. So this is the key that starts and stops the bike. This is called an NFC card, and the way this works is you hold it up to the dash. I guess it's RFID or something like that. The dash senses its presence, says, okay, you can ride the bike now. The problem I have with this is there's nowhere to put this. I will lose it. I will have it in my pocket, and I'll get something out of my pocket, and this will fall out, and I won't realize it, or I'll rip a hole in my pants, or I'm riding in pants that don't have pockets because they're motocross pants, something like that. So it's a cool idea. You get two of them. You get a red one and a black one. The black one lets you go into race mode, which is the fastest, most powerful mode. The problem is, I'll lose it. So I came up with this quick little easy idea, and that is just a card holder that bolts on with these two existing bolts. And the way it works is it's just a nice little slot, friction fit. It's got a long enough tether that is elastic, this comes with it, that it's going to stay attached. The way it works is you can slide it in here, and it cannot fall out because when the seat is closed, it goes all the way down to the battery. And to show you, I can pull it halfway out, close the seat. I'm going to lose that one. Heard it click, seat is closed. Now I will reopen the seat, and you can see the card is pushed in flush. So that proves to you that this edge of the card is touching this part of the battery right here, just so it can't come out. This bike comes with 7/8 bars standard, which isn't an issue. 7/8 bars have been around forever. They work great. That bike's got them, but if you see, that bike has what's called a cross tie, which connects the top of the bar and stiffens it up. These bars do not come with a cross tie because the screen is in the way, and a lot of people want to run what's called a fat bar. So I'm working on this. This is just a 1 7/8 diameter bar clamp instead of the 7/8 diameter, and it's going to be a standard bolt-on. Nothing real fancy about it, except I'm also going to include this piece, which has these little steps in it, or dowels, that will locate into this, if I can line it up. So you'll have height adjustments. You can stack those if you want with longer bolts to get more bar height out of it, and it'll allow you to run a full-size fat bar with any rise and sweep, and there's 100 different types of bars available to suit your needs. So that's something that I am currently working on. The prototype is being machined as we speak. We'll talk about the screen a little bit. I have had an issue out of the screen. Right here on the side where it says NFC, that's where you place this little card, which powers up the bike or powers off the bike. Now, if you start it with one color card, you have to turn it off with that same color card. You saw oh, that's not supposed to work like that. That's weird. Well, back to my my point is I've had some issues with this screen. The backlight went out about 30 minutes into just playing around in the yard one day, and nothing I could do would turn the bike off. Neither of the cards would work. There is a button underneath right here that's kind of like a manual override. Now, if you turn the bike on with the key cards, this button cannot turn it back off. You can turn it on with the button, but then you have to turn it back off with the button. So this should not work to turn it off. Okay, and it doesn't. We'll try the red one just in case. No. So the issue I had when the screen went dark, the screen still worked, you just couldn't see it because it had no backlight. All the control functions, so we're in eco mode, we can hit this red button, normal, sport, and race. And then it cycles back down in the same, like stair steps up, stair steps down, which is really cool. You can use this button while you are riding the bike. You can use that button at full throttle and it will ramp up the power, just like I said, like stair steps. So that's pretty cool. Some other bikes you cannot change mode while you're riding. There's a button here, it's hard to do, the bike has to be stationary, that kind of stuff. So that is a cool feature. I really like that. Another feature I really, really like that all electric bikes should have, this little guy, reverse. So when you're stopped, you have to be stopped, you can pull that trigger and you'll see it goes into R, and then you use the throttle like normal and it spins the back wheel backwards. Great if you remember you have it. That being said, I wish they would give it more power in reverse. It feels like it's maybe 10% of the power of whatever mode you're in. So I would say half the time that I need reverse, it does not have enough power to actually try to move the bike backwards or even spin the tire. So it is awesome that you have it. It works great on flat ground. If you're in a gnarly situation, it's probably not going to give you enough power, but it still helps. So Altis, if you watch this video, please let us pick how much power we can use in reverse. That would be awesome. There are a ton of options you can do in this bike. With this controller, you've got this little plus and minus and this. So there's tons of settings. We'll just jump into them a little bit real quick. You've got wheel size, which I'm not sure why there's so many wheel sizes. Sometimes it asks you for a password and sometimes it doesn't. 12 inch, 14 inch, 16 inch, 18 inch, 19 inch. So that's your rear wheel size. And I guess that helps calculate speed. Then you've got gear ratio, which I think 9.1 with the 16 inch wheel is the closest to get your speedometer correct. Throttle modes, you've got weak, medium, and strong. That's pretty cool. There's not a huge difference in between them. Torque limit, you got 60, 80, or 100%. That's a neat little feature if you want other people to ride and don't want them to loop it out instantly, because it has a lot of bottom end torque. Energy retrieving, that is your regen, and you can control that without going into this menu. I think this will set your default to where every time you turn the bike on, it'll be in whatever setting you put right here. Mine doesn't always do that, so I don't know. You've got a kickstand sensor, which, funny story about that, I broke that off the very first time I rode it. The problem is it mounts right here. This is the lowest point on the bike. The sensor thread's in here, and I bent it and ripped it off almost immediately. So this little tab is going to get cut off on this bike, because with the kickstand up, nothing hangs lower than that little tab. So kickstand sensor is nice, but I don't need it, I don't run it, and I'm going to get rid of that because you get hung up on it. That being said, you can turn it off in this menu, which is really cool. Tilt sensor, that's pretty funny the way that works. If you fall over, it cuts your throttle. So it's just like a tilt sensor on a gas motorcycle. And it's pretty funny because it throws up this little, it looks like a scooter tipped over on its side. See what else we got. We got race enable, that just lets you get into race mode. I don't know why mine's turned off. It should be turned on. All right. And then you got a lot of display settings, NFC settings. There's a mode for seat lock, which is weird. Doesn't do anything, because when I took that seat latch apart that I just showed you, there was nothing electronic in any of that. So maybe the next generation bikes are going to have something that you can use that for. Bluetooth, all that stuff, I haven't messed with any of that stuff because I don't care, as long as the bike works. Restore factory settings, exit. So you see it's in park. As soon as you pull one of the brake levers, it takes it out of park, which the only thing park really does, which is this button here, is when you're in park, the throttle doesn't do anything when the bike is on. Extremely nice to have that when somebody's getting on or off the bike. The problem is, usually you're not on flat ground and you hold the brake to keep the bike from rolling. So you cannot be in park with the brake on. I don't really like that feature. The other thing I wish Altis would do is when you're in park, I wish they would give the engine or the motor some resistance to where the bike won't free roll. Because I'm almost always on a hill and I want the bike to stay stationary so I can do something with my hands, but you have to hold the brakes. So that's not really a, I don't know. It's just, I think it'd be better if the motor's somewhat locked up when you're in park, just to keep it from rolling. The grips are fine, but if you ride hard, they twist off really easy. So I'm going to do better bars and grips. Luckily, this side is torn up, but it hasn't actually hurt the throttle tube that I can tell. I'm not going to give it any throttle because it would wad the chain up. It auto puts itself in park after about a minute also, which is a cool feature. As long as you remember it's in park and you don't give it throttle to go and it doesn't go anywhere. But all you got to do is touch the brake. Now, moving on to the front. One thing I don't really like is how low this caliper hangs. Much lower than the front axle center line. So you can see I've actually got some rash on it already from not even riding in the rocks yet. So that's going to be a problem. Another thing is, this is your caliper mount, and that is an extruded piece of aluminum. It's very big, thick, beefy, overkill, but the problem is, look how little and spindly the actual fork mount is. So this should kind of be reversed. This fork mount has much more leverage on it than this piece. So this fork mount should be bigger, beefier, stronger, and this one can be thinned out a lot. Now I understand these forks were probably already around before the bike, so they're just adapting this brakes to fit. I will say the brakes on this bike are phenomenal. They do not lack at all. They work very well. That's a good, in this bike segment, brakes usually suck. Power keeps going up. The brakes have been kind of crummy for a while. Not these. These are pretty damn good. I am happy with them, other than their mounting and their location. There is a little stainless zip tie that's normally here that broke on my last ride, and the brake line got into the rotor a little bit. It didn't hurt it hurt the outer sheathing, but it's a braided stainless brake line inside there. So it's just, it's not too bad to keep riding. It's fine safety-wise. But just keep that in mind. If that breaks, you need to be aware, because every time you compress the suspension, that brake line is going to be down into the rotor. And since it's a wavy rotor, it's likely to cut it. People have had issues with this is a little aluminum bolt with a real thin shoulder that pulls the stepped front axle through. People have had issues with those breaking, but if you don't over torque it, it's not an issue. The skid plate's taken a few little hits. It's deformed pretty good on the bottom. I am designing a new skid plate with a UHMW slider to let it glide over rocks a lot easier. It's kind of a goofy design because since this bike has a gearbox, the motor is offset fairly far that way. So you can see this side, even with the gearbox right here, there is about 2 inches of clearance. But if you go to the other side, the motor is hanging out. So the skid plate has to be quite asymmetrical. So I'm working on that. The lower mounts are also asymmetrical, as are the upper mounts. You can see this one sticks out, and this one doesn't. So not an issue, just a little bit of a challenge design-wise. I will say the frame on this thing is stout. It is, I'm not going to say overbuilt at all, but it is designed seemingly to take abuse. I think the frame is overbuilt compared to the suspension, and that leads me to my next topic. I am going to put different forks on this. I'm actually going to put this style front end, which this is a Honda 150R, and it's got more travel. These have something like 10.5 to 11 inches of travel in the forks, and these are 8 inches. So they're also longer, which is going to help with 21-inch front wheel clearance. I have not figured out yet if a 21-inch front wheel and tire combo is going to get into the controller here, or if that controller is going to have to be pushed back a little bit. It is mounted on some stamped steel mounts, so there is probably a little wiggle room for where it can go, but I doubt there's much room. So that's all going to depend on the offset of the triple trees, which is this distance here to here, this way. It may require different offset, which is going to play with the trail number a little bit, which is going to play with the way the bike rides. That is in the future. I'm just trying to have fun and ride this bike as is now and figure out any shortcomings it has. But the chassis, I think, should be able to handle bigger wheels, tires, suspension, no problem. So final thoughts here. I'll wrap this video up. I know it sounds like I was kind of nitpicking and bashing on the bike earlier, but I'm not. I absolutely love the bike. I think it's great. I think Altis has done a very good job, especially for their very first bike. All first production runs are going to have little issues that they can't predict. If you don't test this thing for 3 or 4 years ahead of time, you're not going to know when these little things pop up. But it's a damn good bike. It's the best bone stock out of the box e-bike that I have ever ridden. I'm not going to say it's the best ever. I haven't ridden a Stark. I know I would love a Stark, but they're just so big. I'm not that big. I think it would tire me out too fast riding it hard enduro. So I'm going to try to keep this one as light as possible, but upgrade the suspension a little bit. I'm going to add more air to the forks because I bottom them out pretty easily, and the rear only has 8 inches of travel. It looks like it could have a ton more, but for a bone stock bike, it's pretty damn good. Looks good too, even without all the plastics. So that's my take on it. 1 week of being fairly nice to it. Next week, it's going in the rocks, and I'll report back.